When you travel a lot for work, something interesting happens, right? You end up going out to eat a lot. And for a lot of people, it's a pretty exciting time, right? You get to try different foods, you get to try different flavors, some really good restaurants. And you do this over and over and over. And if you travel a lot, you usually hang out with the same people doing this over and over and over. And there's always the same conversation that happens at the end of every single meal. How was it? Did you like it? Was it good? Was it enjoyable? Was it something refreshing? Was it something new and different? And at first you go, yeah, this is great. I love it. It's fantastic. And then over years and years and years of doing it, you go, yeah, it's fine. It's a fine meal. Why do I bring this up? Because this is kind of how I feel about Iceman. We'll get more into what this all means near the end of this video, but first let's take a look at his cards and talk a bit about them. All right, let's start with Bobby Drake, the alter ego of Iceman. He's got 4 recovery. He's a mutant, 6 hand size, 11 hit points. 11 hit points is a bit more than a lot of the X-Men out there, so that's pretty cool. So after you change this form, shuffle 1 ice card from your discard pile for each copy of Frostbite in play, which if you have several copies in play, this is going to work out really good and really help you out. We'll kind of talk a bit about that later. Bobby Drake begins the game with 6 copies, 6 Frostbite upgrades set aside. We'll talk more about them in a little bit. So Iceman has a 1/2/2 stat line, drops down to a 5 hand size. So his interrupt is when Iceman makes a basic attack or defense against the enemy, attach a set aside copy of Frostbite to the enemy. This isn't limited by, per phase or per round or anything like that. So if you can ready up and do it over and over, absolutely you can keep doing it, which is kind of cool to see. So let's talk about this Frostbite mechanic. It's a null cost upgrade. There's 6 of them. Condition ice. It's a permanent. Attached enemy gets -1 scheme, -1 attack. After attached enemy activates or leaves play, set this card aside. So essentially, if you do it through Iceman attacking, right, you'll attach this card on, possibly another one of these cards on if you can like ready up and do it again. And then that will stay on until after the enemy attacks. If you exhaust the defend, right, with Iceman, so you want to use your 2 defense, so you exhaust the defend, you would put this on before the enemy attacks you, right? And there's some people have questions about that. That's how that interaction would work. So there's 6 of them. I don't think I've stacked all 6. I think the most I got was like 4 or 5. But you can get up there if you try it really hard with like stunning and stunning or confusing, or stunning and flipping down, like timing it correctly. You can kind of figure it out that way. But that was my record. I think it was like 4 or 5. All right, so next card is the Snow Clone, 2 cost ally. 2 cost ally. There's 2 of these cards in there, which is interesting. They can't thwart. They can do 2 attack, and they have 2 life. Cannot have upgrades attached, which stinks if you try to do like the sidekick ability with Snow Clone. I'm going to call him Snow Cone every single time. Can't do anything there, but that's fine. So he takes -1 consequential damage after it attacks an enemy with Frostbite attached. So again, if you have Frostbite on an enemy, then you attach with the Snow Cone. The Snow Cone won't get hit back. So it's kind of nice that you could do that, but there's no way to beef up this like 2 health through upgrades. If you had like team training, it should still work because it's a support on the table. So if you have a card like that, it should be fine, or any variation of something like that. But you just can't put an upgrade like on the Snow Cone, right? So there's 2 of them in there. That's pretty cool. Then Power Belt is a 2 cost upgrade. Item tech. You get +3 hit points, which is really nice. Brings them up to 14, which is a lot. Hero resource. Exhaust this belt to generate a wild resource for an ice card. Almost all of his cards are ice cards. So it's a good resource generator. It's not great. But getting the 3 hit points out there, like, makes it worth it in itself too. Like, so that value is like really good, especially if you can use it a few times to get the resource, but just to get the 3 hit points is kind of huge. All right, so cryokinetic perception. It's a 2 cost upgrade. It's a hero response. After you resolve your freeze ability, which is the thing in the beginning, exhaust this card to draw 1 card. If that card has an ice trait, you get ready Iceman. So this can be really good, especially if your deck is stacked in a certain way. And the way that you can do this essentially is that if you were down, not too, like you didn't have many cards left, right? And you attacked, so there's a frostbite out on something, and then you flip down the Bobby Drake. You can shuffle 1 or 2 or 3 of your ice cards, depending on how many are out there, based off of frostbites. So if you only have a stack of 10 cards, there's a greater chance that cryokinetic perception will draw an ice card, right? So you just have to kind of like not memorize what's in your deck, but count your discard pile a lot. Like if you do this really early on in your deck, it's not as good, but later on it can be really good. And readying up you know, Iceman is generally pretty strong, mainly because of this card. Ice Slide's a 2-cost upgrade. Iceman gets +1/+1/+1 on the stat line and gains the aerial trait. What's rough is if you change to alter ego form, you shuffle this card back in your deck. Now, if you time it right and your deck is pretty thin, you can get this back pretty fast. It's not as bad. People were making it like not a big deal losing this card. To me, it's kind of huge in 2 ways. One, Iceman is really bad at thwarting, and we'll get into that a little bit. So I want him to have 2 threat removal, generally speaking, because I'm not playing him in Justice most of the time. I'm playing in Protection and Leadership. That's the 2 that I've really found for him to work. I mean, Justice and Aggression are fine, but yeah. So I like that increased stat line, and to lose it is kind of rough. And then if something like catches that card and I can't use it or discards it, like that really stinks. But if you plan around Aerial, like, and I said this in other videos, and I know people disagree with me on this, that like you should still plan an Aerial build around people that don't have Aerial built in. I don't do that. There's too many times that I've just gotten kind of messed up by that, where I've planned out all my aerial stuff and I just don't have aerial yet. So I'm just sitting on cards for like 2 or 3 rounds because I just have aerial stuff, but I'm not aerial yet. So I don't like that strategy. It doesn't work for me personally. Maybe for you it does, but it never works well for me. So anyway, it's rough that you lose this card switching to alter ego. Is it the end of the world? No, but man, it kind of hurts sometimes. Like that was rough. So I feel like as a solo player, I'm not flipping down a ton anyway, so it's not as bad. I feel like in multiplayer, this is like a bigger ordeal, but hopefully you can shuffle it back in through your alter ego ability. If you don't have much left, then you're guaranteed to get it again. Frozen Solid, there's 2 of them in there, I believe. It's 3-cost upgrade, Condition Ice. Hero form only, attached to an enemy, max 1 per enemy. When attached enemy would activate, discard Froze instead. Then attach a set-aside copy of Frostbite to the enemy, which is really nice. Canceling activations is massive, especially with steady or stalwart villains. Doesn't matter if they're steady or stalwart, right? You're canceling that activation. So this card is very valuable. It's really good. And then putting a Frostbite on it is really nice. And then if you attack or defend against the enemy, you figure the -2 on both those stats now. Really good. All right, Ice Wall is the big card that everyone likes to talk about. It's a 4-cost support card. When identity would take any mana damage from enemy attack, place that damage here instead. It's a force interrupt, so you have to do it, right? It's not optional. It's force, so you have to do it, as long as it's an identity. Then, if there is at least 8 damage here, discard this card and attach a set-aside copy of the Frostbite to each enemy that just attacked. So, it's a big card. Right, it's a very expensive card. It's one that I never played a ton because it's so expensive, but it's good when it works, right? It's a very, very good card, especially in multiplayer. It's really nice that, Iceman can kind of block for a little while. It can be really strong in that sense that it's almost like a round for free, right? Where you don't have to worry about things for a round. So that can be really nice. I think it's a really cool card in the way that it works. I like this mechanic, but it's a very expensive card. Now, you can, again, bring it down with certain things with like the belt, and if you have whatchamacallit, team building exercise, right? There are ways to make this card cheaper. So you might have to build around it in that sense because basically everything is ice, but still kind of an expensive card. I really want to double check just so you can see the power belt wording. You exhaust the belt, generate a wild resource for an ice card. It doesn't have to be like an ice event or something like that. All right, so speaking of events, we get to Arctic Attack. There's 2 of them. 2-cost event. It's a superpower. Choose an action to either deal 4 damage to enemy and attach Frostbite to it, or deal 6 damage to enemy with Frostbite attached. 2 for 6 is the way to go, right? That's really, really good. So that's usually what I like to try to aim for. 2 for 4 isn't bad. Adding a Frostbite on is like, okay, like it's not great, so I'd rather have the Frostbite on first because the 2 extra damage to me is worth more than getting hit for -1, right? Just in my mind, that's the value. I know people might evaluate that differently. For me, that's kind of the value proposition that I look at. So, not a bad card. Ice Blast, 3-cost event. Choose a player, attach a set-aside copy of Frostbite to the villain each minion engaged with that player. Deal 3 damage to each enemy with a copy of Frostbite attached. Now, there are times I've played this, and it's kind of bonkers, right? Like, if you have a lot of drone minions out there from Ultron or anything like that, especially the earlier on villains where they only have like 3 life, even if they have 4 and you can like Frostbite them, it's pretty nice. But this is a nice card in the way that it works. Dealing that 3 damage to everyone, and even if you don't knock them out, giving them each Frostbite is really nice. yeah, it's really nice. And if you have frostbite attached to somebody else that wasn't involved in that, like they still get hit by it. So we didn't do that a ton when we played, but we didn't do that a ton in the sense like if we use this card, it wasn't already something else with like ice, frostbite attached to something. So anyway, regardless, we were just kind of focusing on like getting frostbite and things and then dealing 3 damage to everything, which is a good card. It's a really interesting card, especially dealing with minions. It's nice to see this kind of card exist. And also I forgot, is there 2 of them? Yeah, there's 2 of them. All right, then we have Chill Out. It's the last 2 cards in this deck. It's a 2-cost event. Remove 3 threat from a scheme and attach a set aside copy of Frostbite to an enemy. 2 for 3 threat removal isn't great. It's not great. And this is his biggest weakness is going to be his threat removal. Attaching Frostbite onto something helps a bit with this, but it's not like a huge like cost boost, right? It's not really like changing the way that he plays to make him like that much better. I don't know. Like, I'm not a big fan of this card. Going back to what I stated at the beginning of this video, if I was to look at Iceman in a vacuum, right, and he's the only hero for Marvel Champions that exists, am I happy or not, right? Do I enjoy playing him? Yeah, absolutely. He's fun. He's fine. Like, it's great. I mean, there's things that are weak about him. Justice is a little rough. Is the mechanic cool enough? Yeah, it's cool enough. It does things well. I mean, it's interesting. Ice Wall is an interesting card, right? The way his upgrades work, I think are pretty cool. I'm not a big upgrade player, but I do like playing them because I think they're neat. Yeah, really good, really cool. Very basic and easy to understand. If we zoom out of that vacuum a little bit and we look at compared to the other Age of Apocalypse heroes with Bishop and Magic, how do I compare him to them? He's fine, right? He's fine. Magic I don't love, but I could see her staying power lasting longer because she's a little more complex for me, right? There's a little more to understand and a little more to unpack there. There's some cool things you can do, especially with like the Mystic trait Mystic trait. And then as far as Bishop goes, I mean, honestly, Bishop's one of my biggest surprises in a while. Maybe not compared to X23, but it's a big surprise nonetheless, where Bishop I thought was going to be super straightforward and there's not going to be a lot of depth there. And it turns out there's more so than I thought, right? I did not expect him to be as interesting and dynamic of a hero, not even power-wise, just as far as interest-wise goes. So when you compare it zoomed out a little bit, like, yeah, it's still like Iceman's still good, and that's great. Now let's zoom out to, what are we at, 40, 50 some heroes, whatever it is now? How do I rank Iceman against the rest of them? He's all right. Like, he's fine. Like, there's no glaring thing where I'm like, oh, this design is just bad, right? Like, this is bad design. It's nothing like that. It's just, it's very straightforward. The way the frostbite mechanic works is, it's cool, pun or not, cool enough. But it's not like, and it's like, wow, like, I could really see myself playing with this and really getting in depth with this and really kind of like trying to break this down and understand it more, right? Like, I never got that sense of playing because it felt kind of redundant, right? All right, frostbite the enemy a bunch or a decent amount. Make sure you get the power belt out there with kinetic perception. Get your clones out there if you can, and get ice slide out there. All right, you get your upgrades out there, and you're kind of good to go, and then just kind of play the game, right? Go through the motions. As far as different aspects, this is what kind of makes him not bad, in my opinion, is that with different aspects, he does play a bit differently, which is interesting. You can do some decent, cool ally swarms with him. Leadership, aggression, you can get him to swing pretty good, because if you get ice slide out there, his base swing is 3, which is really nice. You put like the +1 attack on from aggression, now he's swinging 4. That's pretty cool. And then you have a chance of readying up on top of that. Okay, like that could be kind of fun. With protection, I usually fall into a perfect protection build with him. Not on purpose, but it's just what it is. I know some people are doing repurpose builds. I'm not a big repurpose build guy, but there's some interesting things to do. Like, this is what kind of makes him, I think, not bad, is that in each aspect, he does feel a bit different, does feel a bit strong, and does feel unique in that aspect. But on just his surface, like it feels like I'm just playing, at that point, I'm just playing whatever the aspect build would be for any generic hero. Right? Insert any generic hero, and there's not a ton of interesting interaction for the most part that he has with the aspects. So at least that I've found. Right? I'm just playing a certain aspect type, and it doesn't matter if you replace this hero with anyone else. The build would kind of be the same. The way you play would be kind of the same. It wouldn't be anything like too different and tricky. So this is kind of how Iceman feels to me, right? And if you disagree with me, please put down in the comments. Let me know what you really like about him, what you don't like about him, whatever. And I'm not saying he's bad by any means. I don't think he's a bad hero. I just think he's fine. And I think the problem with me, and before I made this video, because it took me a long time to make this video, because obviously he's been out for a while now, and almost every other content creator has a review of Iceman at this point. The reason it took me so long to do this is because I've been kind of reflecting on the state of the game right now. And one of the big things I think is that they are very good at coming out with not bad to good heroes, right? But the problem is, if every hero is just good, that's not like above the average anymore. That is the average, right? If good is the average, then you need to be better than good, right? You need to do something either mechanically really cool I've never seen. You need to be really deep or have good depth and good complexity, so that makes me want to keep coming back, or just gotta be fun, right? Sometimes you just have heroes like Scarlet Witch, in my opinion, is just really, really fun, really, really enjoyable. And I get that fun and complexity and depth and all that stuff. A lot of this stuff is subjective. Some of it might be a little objective, but most of it's subjective. So again, you might say like D20, like, I'm having a blast playing Iceman. That's awesome. Good. Like, that makes me happy. And that's why this game is in such a healthy spot right now, that we can have, like I said, 50 some heroes. You could love this one. I could love this one. And we're all pretty happy because we're all, loving different heroes. So, anyway, this is what part of the reasons, because I sat here and I looked at it and like, I see a lot of people online, like, really liking Iceman, and I can see it. But for me, I'm at the point now, and this is what makes reviews kind of hard to do, is I'm at the point now where like, good is just okay now, right? A good hero is just okay. And it's a good problem to have, right? I don't may be like, oh, this is terrible, this is awful. It means they're really good at design right now. I mean, they're consistently good at design. We've had bad heroes, strange, but we've had bad heroes before, but they're not making those heroes anymore, with the exception, in my opinion, of Deadpool. But generally speaking, they're not making those heroes anymore. They're making good heroes consistently. But if you're hitting good consistently, I want you to do better than that now, right? I need to see heroes that are better than that. And I don't think this is that hero yet. Could Jubilee or Nightcrawler be that hero? Absolutely. Absolutely. And hey, if they start doing more with the ice trait and they start doing some other stuff that makes him more interesting in a bunch of different aspects, yeah, I'm all game. I'm not going to stop playing Iceman. I enjoy playing him. It was one of those things where, for those that don't know, before I do a hero review, I play 12 to 15-ish games of Iceman, and it wasn't a struggle to play Iceman because I was not enjoying him. It's just because he felt very kind of generic to me. It just felt like very simple and basic, and I just rather play other people. And that's kind of where I am in Marvel Champions nowadays, is a lot of times with certain heroes, I just rather play other heroes. So anyway, as far as for me, is he good? He's very in the middle. That's where he's going to end up in my rankings, I think, when it's all said and done, when we do it after the rest of the heroes are released. I think he's going to be very much in the middle. I know a lot of people take that as to be like, oh, D20 hates Iceman. I don't hate Iceman. Like, if he ends up on a live stream over on twitch.tv/D20 Woodworking, we play marbles and I get stuck with Iceman, I'm not going to be upset about that. I'll be like, yeah, that's cool. I'll be upset if I have to play him 5 or 6 times in a row, but not like 1 or 2 times. I'm more than fine with that. So anyway, those are my overall thoughts. Let me know what you think about Iceman. I'm always interested in reading that stuff. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff down below. It really helps with the channel. And yeah, if you haven't yet, make sure to go check on the Patreon. Because of the Patreon members, we'll be playing a 3-player game down the table. There's some good benefits you get with Patreon or coffee. Both the links of those are down below. I'm going to tell you right now, because if you made it to this video, and I know a lot of you don't, right? I see the graph. I see the graph of people cutting out. So for you that actually stuck around to the very end, let me know down in the comments. But we're working on something to be added to the patrons on Patreon and the Ko-fi members and whatnot. I think it's gonna be a cool thing. It's not gonna be anything that like blows your mind away, but I think it's gonna be a cool little thing, that just a nice little extra something to, say thanks for supporting the channel. Thanks for supporting me. So we're working on that right now. I got a team of people working on it, aka my wife. So I think it's gonna be really good. I'm really excited for it. So keep that in mind and let me know. So anyway, appreciate you watching the video, and I will see you all next time.